Hey, podcast listening people, welcome to another edition of the B2B Mentors podcast. First off, honored, grateful to have you here. And you can listen on all your favorite podcast apps. Make sure you do me a tiny favor, share this. And if not only for you, I guarantee you there's someone in your network who's going to get great value out of this podcast. We bring on everything from business celebrities, top marketing experts, and my favorite, real practitioners that can help you grow in your business, your marketing, your career. And same as always, I have a great treat for you today. A guest with me, Rachel Truair, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Cart.com, the leading provider of comprehensive e-commerce solutions that enable retail brands to easily sell and fulfill across every channel. Prior to Cart.com, she led both enterprise and SMB marketing teams at companies including Confluent, Adobe, Magento, Oracle, and 3M, and is very well accomplished. And we have some great content to talk about. So welcome, Rachel. Honored to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Connor.
Absolutely. Let's start, with a little bit on where did you get into the marketing? What drives the passion for you being in the oftentimes dynamic, interesting, and complicated and not so easy all the time marketing world?
Yeah, I guess maybe I was born into it. My mom was actually a marketer for a magazine called Texas Monthly for about 26 years. But I grew up, I loved to write as a little girl. I wrote countless stories and I just had a huge imagination. If you ever saw me, I'm left-handed, so my hand was always covered with ink on the back of it, and because I was constantly writing. So I always was just kind of interested in telling stories and thinking about things creatively. And when I went to work at a startup, I was the number 2 employee at a startup that was just really getting off the ground. We were doing like under $250,000 in revenue when I joined. And it was back in 2006. And I was doing kind of a blended customer success and sales role where I would respond to all of the leads and bring the deals in. And then I would actually be the customer success rep. And what I found was I was constantly kind of just responding to my prospects with the same information. And I was writing these long emails and helping them understand what our services were all about. So I went to the CEO and I said, hey, have you ever thought about starting a blog? And this was back when really companies didn't have blogs. It was all very new back then. I had a couple of friends that were at MIT that were doing personal blogs that I had kind of learned about. And so I pitched the idea of starting a blog, and that really was what became our inbound content marketing machine that we built over the course of time that I was there. And, kind of explored the whole world of what became inbound, digital marketing. And we were spending, a lot of money at the time on Google pay-per-click leads and whatnot. And we were able to start shifting a lot of our spend toward more kind of organic search and getting some, user-generated content strategies up and running. And ultimately, inbound was what drove about 70% of our business at that company. And it grew to be a multi-million-dollar business. It grew into, 50 plus employees. And so I was very fortunate to get to kind of build out the marketing function there at that startup as the company grew. And that was really the beginning of what became my kind of B2B marketing career.
That's amazing. And I think, of all the top marketers I've interviewed over the years, the fact that you've had legitimate account management, sales experience, and kind of seemingly naturally came to the conclusion of, well, I'm doing these sales functions, I'm getting these questions, I need to do something smarter to provide, information for these prospects and for my clients, and discovered content marketing, right? And the value of it naturally. But some of the best marketers really have that sales background. And so you've kind of naturally evolved that. Do you miss being in the sales, or are you pretty excited about, being in the bigger picture of helping to drive leads now?
Yeah, I love the creativity that marketing allows me. In my role at Cart, I actually have our BDR organization in my team, so our business development rep. So many people who, just like me, when I was at that company, were early starting out in their careers, learning what sales was and how to do it and how to talk with prospects. And so having that team in my organization is actually really rewarding. I spent a lot of time with them just helping kind of mentor them and talking through, the fact that the work they do is really challenging. You get a lot of no's as a BDR and a lot of people hanging up on you. And I think it does also make me a more empathetic leader, in terms of just my own interactions. I try to be, when I get a cold call on my cell phone from a BDR, I try to take it and listen to them and hear what they have to say. Just because I've been in that role and I know it can be hard, but I think it also teaches you a lot about what customers are going through, what their challenges are. And a lot of times some of your best content ideas can come from those conversations. So keeping that kind of closed loop feedback with the BDR teams and my campaigns team on the marketing side is super, super helpful.
And so cart.com, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, technically your first official CMO position. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. My first CMO title.
So stepping into this, what is going through your mind? What are you concerned about? What are you excited about? What's kind of like, what are you thinking about and considering? Because there may be a lot of other marketers out there that are either entertaining or have leveled up into higher level marketing positions in, a massive company like Cart, for example.
Yeah, I was pretty particular about when and where to take the CMO title. It was actually not the first CMO title offer that I've had as a marketer, but the first one I'd accepted. And for me, it was a little bit of managing my overall kind of diversity and my experiences. I wanted to make sure that before I took on a role like this, I had really solid exposure to kind of all parts of marketing. And I felt like once I, arrived at Cart, I definitely had that. I'd been at several kind of large enterprise companies like Oracle and Adobe, where I'd seen kind of at scale how those companies are growing and how they're kind of building their overall go-to-market strategies in a global environment. And then I'd also been at companies that were kind of smaller and high growth, like Magento, which had spun out with private equity from eBay. And when I joined there, it was about 600 or so people. We were looking to double our revenue in, over the course of a couple of years, and had an opportunity to kind of build out marketing programs there across the Americas, which was about 60% of our business at the time. So I had a lot of exposure there to just kind of building out a marketing team. Same thing at Confluent. It was pre-IPO when I joined. We went public about a year after I joined. So I'd gone through an IPO at that point. I felt like I'd kind of done pretty much all the kind of things I needed to do to be prepared to be a CMO. Sure. And, I think that was when I was approached about the opportunity at Cart. It was really good timing because I felt very much ready for the challenge. And then the other big thing I look for in all of my companies I've gone to is making sure that the team that I'm joining is really strong. I've been very fortunate to be pretty much recruited out of every role I've had by someone I've worked with or for before. So our president at Cart is actually someone I worked with at Magento and then Adobe on the sales side. So, again, a testimony to building really strong relationships with sales as a marketer is just that, by kind of making sure I was working positively and collaboratively and respectfully with my sales counterparts, I was able to kind of make my way to Cart. And the big thing, at Cart that I've seen is, it was a company that grew really quickly, from 2020 into 2021 and, had a lot of growth, had a lot of different companies that we acquired and brought together to, kind of make, a 1 + 1 = 3 opportunity for people that are.
And I'm sure COVID just totally accelerated that for that industry.
100%. And so a lot of what we were doing was creating, a kind of best in breed offering. And, so we had a lot of people on the marketing team with a lot of different experiences and a lot of different backgrounds. So I spent a lot of time when I got here just focusing on the people side of things and looking at the team structurally, making sure that it made sense for go-to-market, getting them aligned to essentially, our offerings and making sure people had clear lines of accountability around what we're marketing and selling. And then saying, okay, let's put the budget behind it and align the budget to kind of our operating model and understand that, we really had to get into the numbers and look at how much are we growing in different parts of the business, what are the overall conversion rates in that business, and build out a model to get from the start of this year to be able to hit our numbers through the end of the year and aligning our budget and our spend on the marketing side to that. So, I think I'm very much a modern CMO in that respect. I come at it from more of a data-driven standpoint, and I definitely look at more on the demand side. I think that, a lot has been said about the short tenure of a CMO. And I think that the first thing that can get CMOs fired is usually not hitting the numbers. The brand and some other things sometimes can wait, but hitting the numbers is usually the thing that gets people into trouble. And so that's where I've spent a lot of my energy in the first 6 months on the job here is making sure we were set up for success to be able to hit our numbers this year.
Plus, you've been in that position in sales where you're sitting there like, okay, we've got this heavily investment into marketing, and where are the leads? Like, where are the leads coming from? Give everyone a little bit of deeper context as to Cart.com. Like, who is the market that you are, going to?
Yeah, so we serve a range of brands that are looking to kind of grow and scale, and generally brands that are looking to be able to sell across multiple channels. So whether they're selling on Amazon or through other marketplaces, they want to be able to sell on social feeds, or they might have their own kind of direct consumer motion happening. We really enable brands to be able to do that at scale. And then we have tools and technology around that to help support that. So we've got products that help with, overall kind of attribution and analytics to make sure that you're spending the right dollars in the right places. And then we also have some fulfillment offerings that help brands make sure that they're actually putting their inventory and their products in the fulfillment centers that are going to get their products to their consumers the fastest and for some of the best pricing. And then we also have also agency services that we provide in-house. So we actually do a lot of work with brands to help them grow and scale their marketing online. And, fun fact, when I got to Cart, one of the decisions I made is we really needed to be able to kind of drink our own champagne. So we moved away from the external agency we were leveraging and started using our own in-house marketing services team for all of our paid digital motions, and are having great success there, really starting to work as a team and getting, great indicators and information from that team, leveraging our own team and products.
So in terms of like actual influencers and decision makers, who are those personas that you and your team are building relationships with?
Yeah, I think it varies depending on the brand, but we have a lot of, kind of co-founder, founder, CEO level relationships on, with businesses that are just starting to scale. So primarily D2C businesses that are, kind of growing rapidly. They have outgrown, whatever situation they might have with their agency or their 3PL, and are looking for support that's a little bit more of the next level that they're getting to. And then we also spend a lot of time with, marketers. So people that are managing digital campaigns, people that are managing, the overall storefront for their website, and, kind of people that are really focused on the numbers. So we also spend a lot of time working with data scientists and people that are helping with some of the, kind of metrics and measurement that go into having an e-commerce brand.
So you got left brainers and right brainers that you're really marketing to. And you mentioned something interesting, stepping in, focusing on the demand gen side in the beginning. And one thing we talked about in our discussion the other day was this notion of attribution without action is BS. That's how you said it, right? Is BS? Or
I think I said
you
meaningless.
said meaningless, but I just put some oomph on it there for you.
There you go.
For dramatic effect. But what do you mean by that? And what can other marketers learn, about that from your experience?
Yeah, well, having, literally kind of grown up as a marketer from the early days of digital and being able to kind of measure everything, I've seen a lot of different attribution models and the evolution of attribution models from, first touch, last touch, multi-touch. And, I've worked with kind of proprietary attribution models that companies have built themselves, as well as looking at vendors that support it. And what I've come to learn is, a few different things. One is that overall, attribution models can tell you a lot about what's happening with your business and what's working and what's not. But if you just kind of look at the analysis and go, oh, okay, makes sense, and move on, you're not getting anywhere. So when I say attribution without action is meaningless, it's kind of like you've got to be able to take those insights and drive them forward. And it could be, hey, is this working well? Well, how do we create more of this? How do we make sure that, whatever's working well, we're generating more of, or do we have enough? Making sure you're at least being intentional about deciding that maybe you're good there and you don't need to continue investing and just kind of keep the lights on there. The other thing is that, what I see businesses struggling with a lot is they spend a lot of time and effort nailing the attribution model. and then they'll change something with their business strategy, their business process. They'll introduce a new product and never revisit the attribution model. And so what can happen is you end up acting on the wrong things, or perhaps what something's telling you is important and working well actually isn't in this new business model. So making sure that you're keeping up to date with your changing dynamics of your business when it comes to attribution is another kind of critical area. And then the other big sticking point is that a lot of times, marketers get really familiar with attribution models, but the rest of the executive team doesn't. And so as a marketing leader, making sure that everyone on the executive team understands the attribution model and how it works. And also that it's a little different than, traditional kind of financial metrics. Attribution does not always equal ROI, right? And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what it actually is or is not. It's something to look at, but it's not the only thing to be looking at. And when you get into things like LTV to CAC or, the overall ROI of a program, it could be very misleading to only focus on the attribution elements versus just looking at the overall numbers. And so I think making sure as a leader, you're kind of keeping the other team members informed on what attribution is, what we need to do around it, why we're acting on certain things or why we're not, is another kind of critical piece.
Give an example of that in your own case in, Cart.com's own marketing and efforts.
Yeah. Well, I'll give an example that comes to mind around kind of a partner marketing motion. So, working in B2B, you have challenges sometimes where you're trying to do a lot of work with partners. And this is actually from a different company, but we were trying to do more with our partner ecosystem. And we started spending some budget on partner marketing, looking at how do we drive more work with the partners. And we started seeing some great attribution come through for our pipeline. Well, we would go to the partner team, the partner ecosystem team, and say, hey, look, we're doing great with these programs. And they were not getting any credit. They weren't getting any attribution because at the end of the day, we could only really give one team the credit for the effort. And so for them, we were really not doing anything worthwhile. And what that ended up doing is making us change our strategy. We were having to constantly revisit what was actually working and generating pipeline because it wasn't actually generating the pipeline that gave them credit. And it created a lot of friction between the teams, and unnecessarily so, I might add. And so ultimately, when you end up in those situations, what you have to do is you kind of end up having to have conversations at the leadership level about what are we really trying to drive here with this model. And if we're not driving the right behaviors and we're actually creating friction and things that are working actually aren't showing up properly in the attribution model, does this model actually mean anything anymore? And, at the time I went around asking some questions of some of my peers in the space. And I talked with one of the co-founders of an attribution technology who told me something that's really stuck with me, which is the best attribution model is the one that everyone in the team believes in. And at the end of the day, there is, a little bit of art and science to it. Cart, one of the things that really attracted me to the company is we actually have a product called Unified Analytics that provides attribution for B2C companies that are trying to do, make sure that they're spending their money on advertisements and things that actually drive demand for the products that they have. And we're actually able to help you understand what things aren't in inventory so that you're not actually spending money and dollars against things that you don't actually have the ability to sell, which I know is a huge challenge for a lot of retailers.
So digging into that a little bit further, and I think the big word of the day for a lot of marketers now is this whole dark social, dark funnel kind of arena. And us as marketers on the branding side of things, we know content is crucial for branding, building relationships, sales enablement, but it's one of those areas that's incredibly tricky in terms of measuring attribution.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? With leadership, with, other marketers who are maybe like, I know I got to do this, but I don't have a way or understand a way to show my leadership team that this can work and does work. Someone sees us on LinkedIn for 3 months, never likes anything, never comments anything, but all of a sudden 6 months later, they go to our website, fill something out. Like it's very challenging. I think it's, from what I've heard, is one of the biggest challenges for most marketers nowadays.
Yeah, I went to a CMO dinner in Austin recently, and this topic came up, and we all kept circling around the same question, which is there a solution? And I think the challenge is that people look at attribution as if it's the end of the line, right? And I think it's just another metric to look at. The same thing could be said for most financial metrics. You don't just look at one financial metric. If you're looking at, someone's, 10K, their annual filing report, and, seeing that, they had one really good metric on there, just looking at that in isolation is not going to tell you the full story of how that company is performing. And the same could be said for attribution. Just looking at that one metric is not always going to tell you the full picture. And one thing I like to think about is, you're talking about brand. I mean, has anyone ever said, well, we're not getting enough attribution or pipeline from the website, so let's just turn it off. We don't need a website anymore. There's certain things that we do knowing that there's inherent value to it, and you're never going to be able to fully attribute all of the value to that one channel or program. But at the same time, you've got to be able to articulate the overall value. And sometimes it's in a way around attribution. Sometimes it's looking at certain things like, share of voice or some other metrics that may not fall into the realm of a true attribution model. What I see a lot of marketers doing, though, is they kind of avoid the problem by not addressing it. So because it's hard to measure something like brand, there aren't any KPIs being set. And I think that's where marketers get into trouble a little bit, is they don't spend the time to really think about what is a way we could be measuring this. It may not look like how we're measuring other programs, but we need to have some kind of North Stars around this and be able to point to, at the end of the quarter, we spent this much money and here's what we got back. And that's one thing I've been, really focused on in terms of when I, restructured my team and kind of looked at roles and responsibilities, making sure that we had really clearly outlined not just our overall kind of operating model for the year, but also team charters, looking at where all the interlocks, making sure that each team had a really clearly defined kind of overall set of metrics that they measured against, and then looking at a quarterly basis, setting OKRs around those.
I think that was a really powerful, if it's like, if there's one thing I can't measure, then why measure any of it at all? But, you should know your numbers up to the point of, there's some areas where it may be impossible to know for certain, but if you know all your other metrics, then you're going to have enough confidence to stick through the things that are working and be able to say, I really don't think this is working at all.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where if you just avoid it and shove it under the rug, you're going to have to address it eventually. And if you don't,
those skeletons will come out of the closet at some point.
If you don't have a benchmark, you're not going to have anywhere to even look at to say, well, this is what it was like when I started here, or last quarter when we started this program. So you've got to be able to set those benchmarks. And the other thing is I talk with my team about this, is having a goal. Sometimes you miss the goal, right? You set enough cascading goals down that the chances of hitting every single goal in a marketing organization are very unlikely. We, at any given time, we might have 5 or 6 top line goals, but then you might have within that, another 20 goals per top line goal that people are trying to hit. And you're not going to hit every single one of them, but at least understanding where you landed and why you missed, or why maybe the goal was, not set properly. Without having that level of inspection on the business, it's kind of, you're just guessing. And so being able to kind of look at, okay, this is where we missed, and understanding why, and here's what we're going to do about it. That's where the action comes into play.
So being a CMO myself and networking with, a handful of CMOs, and where the state of the economy is, on average, B2B sales marketing teams closing 20-25%. And I think that's going down. That number seems to be decreasing across the board. Some industries, great, phenomenal, they're doing awesome. Some are less. And so for us marketers, means getting more into the pipeline to meet average or above average metrics than probably a couple years prior, when everything's hot, the economy's crazy. It just seemingly there is no bottom whatsoever at any point in time. And so what's, in your case, what's working absolute best on the demand gen and lead flow from an outbound perspective? And then I want to hear your perspective on an inbound as well, just one of each.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think having really, really strong on the outbound side, making sure we have a really clear picture of who our target audience is critical. If you haven't spent a lot of time understanding with your sales teams what an ideal customer looks like, and who the people are that we need to be talking to, the types of accounts, getting really clear about the kind of buying persona, the questions they're going to ask. Spending a lot of time on targeting is so important, because if you don't have your targeting set really clearly, you're going to end up spending a lot of money on the wrong things and driving the wrong types of behaviors and the wrong types of leads that don't really become opportunities in pipeline. On the inbound side, the thing that I'm seeing a ton of great success around right now is really around intent data. I think, the fact that it is so competitive, to your point right now, that, we don't necessarily have the luxury of waiting a couple of quarters to nurture all the leads and see which ones turn up to be, in market. Being able to leverage intent data at the account level and target those accounts that we either suspect or know to be in market for either our services or our competitor services is game changing. And there's always seasonality to any business. We have several different types of business within Cart, so we have a varied amount of seasonality happening. And for some of this, being able to strike while the iron's hot for people that are in market right now is really, really important. So intent data, if you're not doing it as a B2B marketer, it can be complicated. You have to explain it to, I spent a couple different phone calls with my finance team talking about why intent data matters and what it is and how it's not something we could necessarily do ourselves. It requires championing it internally and then reporting regularly on how you're seeing results from it. But you will start to see some traction there if you can get the program up and running.
Is this a vendor that you could share with us that you like on that front?
Yeah, we're using 6th Sense for our intent data programs right now.
I know that we had 6th Sense CMO on the podcast.
Yeah, she's great. Latini. Yeah, she's wonderful.
That's awesome. Okay, so 6th Sense you like to use on that, and then so for on the inbound side, what seems to be working pretty well for you there?
That was actually one of our kind of inbound motions, but I would say that's the big one right now. We're talking through, just looking at testing creative is another area. I think, as ad spend is getting more competitive, making sure your creative is really tight, and it may be copy, it may be messaging. But also looking at, the overall kind of imagery and A/B testing against imagery is super important as well.
Are you doing predominantly LinkedIn ads or Facebook ads or?
We're primarily on LinkedIn. We do a little on, LinkedIn and Google are our kind of main areas. But, I think it just really depends on your business where you need to show up. But we've found the most success kind of doing a hyper-targeted effort on LinkedIn. Cool.
So 2 last questions, and then we can wind this thing down. Number 1, anything else top of mind? You've got a room full of all the B2B marketers out there and business leaders, and anything else you want to maybe share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just wanted to call out that it's about to be March, which is the month of International Women's Day. And as a woman leader, wanted to call out to women, but also their allies all across the business world, that, it's a time to really make sure that we're thinking about equality and promoting diversity in companies, and making sure that women are getting, acknowledged. I'm a mom of 2, and I think that having gone through myself a couple of maternity leaves, I've seen firsthand, the challenges it can have for women in their careers, and making sure that, as women leaders, and also the leaders who might be watching this that are men, that they're thinking about women's, opportunities as they go through these times where they're providing care to their families, that, women tend to work very hard, but also tend to have a lot of challenges with having to leave work because of maternity leave, and it can often disrupt their careers. So being an advocate for women, making sure that doesn't happen, so critical, so important. And wanted to also just share that, if women are looking to navigate that and would like some, just to, someone to talk to, I'm always happy to talk with them about how I've navigated that in my own career.
That's amazing. And as someone who's had as much success as you, anyone, listening to that, I'm sure man or woman who needs a mentor. It's the point of this is B2B Mentors. And part of that, first off, bring value to the table. Don't just go to Rachel and say, hey, I'd like to pick your brain, because no one likes their brain picked. It's icky. But see if there's a way you can provide value. And you got to reach out and ask and find, someone like Rachel who's been in that career position that maybe you want to be or learn, then find a way to add value, build a relationship, and, you never know where that could go. So
yeah, I'm happy to. I'm a very privileged white woman who's had, seen firsthand the effects that maternity leaves can have on my own career. I've had some career challenges as part of that. So if I know if it can happen to me, I just know that it happens a lot more than people realize. And I want to be an advocate for those people where I can be.
100%. And last and most important question, what is the number one fly fishing spot that you can just drop a little golden nugget for everyone at the end there who may be a secret fly fisher person in outside of work time?
I would say if you're into freshwater fly fishing, Jackson Hole's just one of the most beautiful places you can go to do some, freshwater fly fishing. But my favorite spot is for saltwater fly fishing is a little tiny town called Punta Allen. It's just south of Tulum. It's there's about 6 fly fishing lodges there, and that's about it. And it's the most amazing 7 days you'll spend out on the water in the Caribbean. Fishing for several different species, and it's a lot of fun. So if you haven't tried saltwater fly fishing and you like fishing, or maybe you haven't and you're just interested in getting started, check it out. There's also a lot of women's groups that go down and do women's fly fishing trips down there. So check those out too. I've been on a couple of them myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. We were talking about that before we went and recorded. So I never know who may be listening, and someone may want the drop and sounds awesome. So what, by the way, best way people find you, follow you, and get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So add me on LinkedIn. You can send me a note there. I'm also on Twitter at Rachel Truair. I'm rachel.truair@cart.com. Send me an email, whatever. I'm on every platform. So if there's a place to be, you can probably find me there. Beautiful.
Rachel, can't thank you enough. This has been one, really interesting, enlightening, and you're really fun and easy to interview. So I'm super grateful for you coming on the show. Everybody, make sure you go follow, connect with Rachel. Check out what they're doing at cart.com. That's cart.com. Much love to you, my friends. Make it great, and we'll see you on the